Hey guys, how you doing? It's Tuesday. Last time we spoke, we discussed the Battle of the Somme. Again, 7 miles of land gained by the British, but to the tune of 1.2 million casualties, so a stalemate on the Western Front. Before I start, I wanted to, on a personal note, say that I'm thinking about you guys and your families and wishing you all the best. And also just the idea that really being here talking World War I to a camera does not at all substitute being with you guys in the classroom. And I hope I conveyed effectively during the course of the year how much I enjoyed all of you and enjoyed our time in class. But I do miss those times. Hey, let's talk today about what is referred to as total warfare. Later on, the images will be on Schoology. You'll see Total War / Gallipoli. So World War I, the first total war of its kind. What this means is essentially that all the combatants, all the countries involved, did all they could. They were trying to put all the resources, all they had, into finding a way to win the war, almost like an obsession. Every country putting all of their resources, militarily, philosophically, technologically, artistically, everything into finding whatever it was, the chance to win the war and swing the war in their favor. Total warfare, World War I. Now, there are 5 chief characteristics I want to get to a little bit as pertains to total warfare. So 5 different attributes of total warfare. Number 1 has to do with the home front. So number 1 is the home front. Home front simply pertains to those left behind, those wives and their spouses and children and older folks, those who could not fight but were still impacted by the war back on the home front. It also trickled down to them as well. So I want to mention to you that during this time period, there was a huge spike, a huge increase in women working in munitions factories, as trolley operators, as firefighters. So, for example, in Great Britain, there was an increase during World War I, 200,000 women working in the workforce. Before the war, 5 million during World War I. So one element of home front activities involved women taking on a new role in the workforce. A lot of times, most cases, that was making munitions or making bombs in factories. But in addition, it affected them in terms of rationing as well. Certainly metal and rubber and oil were being rationed significantly during this time period. But also they had, for example, on Tuesdays, they had porkless Tuesdays, they had wheatless Thursdays. You could not have certain essential ingredients. Pork and wheat and sugar and butter all were being cut during this time period as well. For example, in America, this played out through the use or the creation of victory gardens. Many Americans were creating victory gardens in their backyards by where they would eat their own homegrown squash, pumpkins, rutabaga, and what have you. Therefore, other foodstuffs being sent over to the front lines to the Americans and their allies. So home front activities was a big one. Second component to total warfare, let's talk a little bit about propaganda. Propaganda. So again, they're throwing their artistic resources into trying to end the war. So propaganda plays a huge role in World War I. I would say in some ways, folks, that propaganda was so important because everyone lost so much during this war. There was so much personal loss, 9 million lives. Almost everyone was impacted by World War I. All that loss, it was essential to have complete consent from civilians on the home front. So to gain complete consent, the governments turned towards artistic resources and the creation of propaganda. And what I would say, the propaganda went very, very far to create and embody, reflect hatred and vilification of the enemy. They wanted to vilify the enemy and make sure that as a civilian you knew, hey, those people are bad, they are evil, they are sinister, they are nefarious. So we see a lot of really, really unlikable, angry, messages coming through propaganda during this time period. The vilification of the enemy through propaganda. Number 3 pertains to the idea of different technologies. All of the sides involved in World War I were attempting to find again, what is that proverbial silver bullet? What is the new technology that will enable us to defeat our enemies? Will it be, a dirigible or a zeppelin? Will it be an airplane? Will it be a new poison gas? Will it be a new flamethrower? So lots of new technologies are introduced during this time period, World War I. Number 4 really embodies today's conflict or campaign that I'll get to here in a few minutes. Number 4, they began to open up or attempt to open up different fronts around the world. After a year or so of essentially chewing on barbed wire in Flanders along the Western Front, we're going to see that all sides involved try to open different fronts, military fronts, elsewhere in the world to gain the advantage, to gain the upper hand. So still talking total warfare, an attempt to develop, conceptualize, open up a new front elsewhere in the world. That was number 4. Number 5, and lastly, the final component is the use of colonial troops. And we see this again today with our next conversation, the use of colonial troops. The major players here, meaning the English, the French, the Germans to a lesser extent, are all trying to utilize all of the powers they have, all the strength they have. And for the English and the French especially, that meant the use of colonial resources, in this case, colonial troops. Let's shift gears here, folks, a little bit. I want to get into the campaign, the battle, if you will, that most embodies or reflects total warfare, as it were, during World War I. This is known today as the Gallipoli campaign. Gallipoli. You spell Gallipoli, G-A-L-L-I-P-O-L-I. Gallipoli. Gallipoli, again, begins actually a year prior to Verdun, so we're going slightly out of order, apologies. So it's going to begin early in 1915, the Gallipoli campaign, and I'll explain in a moment here where it's located. But I wanted to discuss a little bit about the person who conceives of the Gallipoli campaign of 1915. 39 years of age, he's the youngest person to ever hold the title First Lord of the Admiralty, which is sort of a fancy English way of saying he headed up the Navy. 39 years old, First Lord of the Admiralty, you guessed it, Big Winnie, Winston Churchill. So Churchill has this idea that, hey, if we go somewhere else, if we can attack the Germans or perhaps their allies, the Austrians, the Ottomans, the Bulgarians, on a different front, maybe we can win this campaign and win this war. Big Winnie, just a side note, kind of a clever little story that I rather enjoy that maybe reflects a little bit of the, call it arrogance, call it personal strength of conviction or confidence. Once at a dinner party, Big Winnie or Churchill was at a party with a number of guests, and somebody asked him the question, Winston or Big Winnie, please tell us about humanity, about people, what drives us, what drives our impulses. So the whole table was quiet, and Churchill ponders for a moment. He grows ponderous, and he offers this up. The whole room was quiet. He says, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we are all worms. Everyone here, every person is a worm. But I am the glowworm. Love that story. I am the glowworm. We're all worms, but I'm special somehow. I am the glowworm. So Churchill has the idea, let's go somewhere else. Let's go to Gallipoli and attack our enemies there. Now a little bit of geography, and later on you'll see this with our the images posted on Schoology. Gallipoli is a peninsula, part of the Ottoman Empire back in the day. Today Gallipoli is a peninsula, modern day Turkey. So northern section up here is Gallipoli. It's a peninsula, as I mentioned. rocky, very, very hot, difficult conditions. Just south of Gallipoli, which is important, there is a 35-mile strait, 35 miles long, a strait known as the Dardanelles. A 35-mile strait called the Dardanelles. The Dardanelles, again, just south of the peninsula known as Gallipoli, the Dardanelles connects the Aegean Sea in the west, going closer to Greece. So it connects the Aegean Sea in the west with the Sea of Marmara in the east. Important to know that at the very eastern edge of the Dardanelles, near the Sea of Marmara, is the city of Constantinople, known today, of course, as Istanbul. Churchill has the idea that if we can penetrate, if we can take over the Dardanelles, we can take the city of Constantinople, we can push the Ottoman Empire out of the war. And one more thing, very important here, they're thinking, hey, let's attack the weakest member of the Triple Alliance, the Ottomans, but also, as we know from class, by this point in time, the Russians were fighting horribly. They were absolutely a sieve. They were a disaster during the war. Churchill thinks, you know what, if we can control the Dardanelles, that flows eventually into the Black Sea, and then we can also supply foodstuffs, military, fresh troops, yes, to our friends, the ailing Russians. We can keep Russia in the war longer, maintaining a two-front war. If we can take the Dardanelles and take the Black Sea, we can control the whole area, and we can provide military aid to Russia. That was the mindset of Big Winnie right there. Let's see how it goes though. So again, the Dardanelles is a 35-mile, fairly narrow strait just south of Gallipoli. The campaign begins as a naval operation. Okay, so February 1915, this campaign begins as a naval operation. The English and their allies, the French, bring battleships into the Dardanelles. They turn their cannons towards the north, and they begin a major bombardment of the Ottoman fortresses along the Gallipoli Peninsula. So for a month, they bombed incessantly the Ottomans at Gallipoli. It actually was going pretty well. It was going pretty well. Things change about a month later. So March 18th, 1915, the worm turns, so to speak. March 18th, the English are going to lose 6 ships, 6 battleships in the Dardanelles. So 6 English ships are sunk. March 18th, actually 3 went down totally, were sunken, lost forever, and then 3 others were damaged badly. But there were 6 losses of battleships in the Dardanelles. The choice comes to the head admiral of this campaign, maybe my favorite name of the year. Please jot this one down. So the choice comes to, major choice to be made by the chief admiral of the campaign, a man named Sir Sackville Carden. Let me say it again for you. Sir Sackville, that's S-A-C-K-V-I-L-L-E, Carden. C-A-R-D-E-N. Sackville Carden makes the decision. We just lost 6 boats. Let's end this campaign right here. Guys, they were devastating the Ottoman forts. The Ottomans were decimated. The English had no idea. They pull back. They go to Plan B, which is going to involve an amphibious attack for the next month, April, of the Gallipoli Peninsula. This becomes an unmitigated disaster. So the loss of 6 ships, the English pull back and they begin to plan for the next phase, an amphibious land attack, and we'll discuss that later on today. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.